Thank you, Dr. Roden and Dr. Belko for inviting us, and thank you to the Honors College for hosting us. We have several of our medical students, nursing students, and our community health workers with us here today. Some are taking pictures. And we'll start this off with Mirla and I doing some formal presentation, and then we will switch to a student and CHW panel where you will hear from them directly about what their experience has been in this program and how they see it impacting the communities that we serve. This is just a collage of some of the places we've been in the community and some of the things that we do. Our team is up there on the left at Shape Community Center. The top middle is a food distribution event at CUNY Homes in 3rd Ward. On the right is one of our CHWs, Amanda, and one of our marketing team members at a recruiting event for our family care center and for HCC participants. And at the bottom, one of our panelists is a student there with Dr. Brian Reed, who is the chair of clinical sciences. And that took place at a church in 3rd Ward. So I just start with this introduction because our students, our faculty members, our CHWs are out and about in the community, as I know a lot of other UH students and teams are as well. So I want to start sort of very basically to sort of set the stage as to why household centered care exists. And I'm sure many of you might already know this, but much of our health and well-being is not determined by your health behaviors, like whether or not you choose to smoke, whether or not you choose to drink, you know, how much you diet and exercise, but really it's determined by where you live, what resources you have in the places where you live, what access you have to health care, primary care in particular, and those are all called the social determinants or social drivers of health. These are the things that are outside of your personal control that have influence on your overall health or the health of your family and your communities. And this is actually an older pictorial, but all told, you know, more than 50% of our health is probably not determined by our personal choices, but more so by everything that I just said, where we live and what we have access to. So that moves us to health equity as I get us to the point of why household center care exists. Anybody have a sense of what health equity means? I mean, this is Pathways to Equity, and we're very specifically focused on health equity at our College of Medicine and College of Nursing and social work schools. Yes?
So the first thing that comes to mind is like the disparage in health insurance across the country. But like on a worldwide scale, a lot of countries have adopted the insurance model. But there's been a lot of push and I'm not gonna think about the organizations, but big NGOs, right? And they're focusing on primary care, which is what you guys are doing, which is the households and the care where you go and interact with the families and you do screenings and kind of like basic level health care that they don't have access to otherwise.
Absolutely. Those are efforts to move toward health equity, right? Where everyone has the same opportunity to reach their highest and best health, right? But the additional part of that is that no one should be disadvantaged because of where they live or the social context in which they find themselves, right? So in order for health equity to exist, it needs to be fair, it needs to be just. And for those who are already living with disparities, it needs to be able to lift them to at least an even playing level and then move toward full health and good well-being. And that's from the Centers for Disease Control. So the School of Medicine, the College of Medicine is, we took our first class in 2020. So we have 3 classes now. The school was starting to be developed, I think as far back as 2015. So what is our mission at the school? These are our 4 main points: that we are educating a diverse group of physicians, particularly those from underrepresented in medicine backgrounds, that we are conducting interdisciplinary research, providing integrated evidence-based high-value care, and the mission point that aligns most closely with household-centered care is this last one: engaging, collaborating with, and empowering patient populations and community partners to improve their health and health care. So our dean, Dean Stephen Spann, had this idea and this plan for this mission, and together with his initial team to establish the school, went to the colleges of nursing and social work, Graduate College of Social Work, and later the UHD Social Work School, to talk about starting this program, household-centered care, right? If this is our mission, and a lot of these things align with the mission of the other health profession schools, then how do we go about meeting these missions? So just pictures of our various schools that are involved in the program right now. And once they decided that yes, they would come together, they helped to develop what we now have as household-centered care. So our goals for household-centered care are based on these concepts. What we're trying to do and what we do, let me not say trying, what we are doing is partnering with community members and community organizations, institutions like churches, schools, and other respected community entities. And we provide community members team care, team-based care, where we actually are focusing on the social determinants of health. So we are partnering with them through our students. We have small teams of medical students, nursing students, social work students, and our community health workers, and they are literally making house calls. They are going into the homes of residents in 3rd Ward and East End, and instead of doing what you might traditionally think of as a house call, where your doctor's coming and checking your blood pressure and taking care of all your main primary care medical needs, what they are actually doing is trying to address all those other things that affect health. So if a household is in a situation where, say, they're on the verge of losing their housing because they can't pay their rent, our team's goal is to prioritize the most important needs with that household and then help link them to resources that can help meet the needs that they have. We focus on 3rd Ward and East End right now. And so I will just add that our house calls don't always happen inside a home. In the wake of COVID, a lot of folks didn't want a whole team of people in their homes, rightfully so. So we meet all over the communities in 3rd Ward and East End. Sometimes we're in people's homes, sometimes we're at, say, community shops and parks and libraries. That is Doshi House on the bottom left, which is in 3rd Ward. And besides doing the house calls, our teams of students and social workers are also doing community engagement. So as you saw in the earlier pictures, they are out at schools, they are out at CUNY homes, and we have some pics on the right that show, our students doing blood pressure screening. The middle top picture is at Blackshear Elementary in 3rd Ward. Next to it, we have our CHWs delivering school supplies to Blackshear, and on the bottom again, CUNY Homes food distribution. So our household-centered care program does two things. We are doing house calls to individual households, and we are going into community spaces to educate and to assist with other community-based needs. And why do we focus on 3rd Ward and East End? Well, we are in 3rd Ward, right? So we are part of 3rd Ward here at University of Houston, and East End is our neighbor. And that little yellow star in the middle is U of H. The purple is 3rd Ward, and the green outline is East End. But the other reason that we focus on those besides proximity is that 3rd Ward and East End have higher than usual rates of multiple chronic conditions. So high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, right? Higher than the rest of Houston and higher than most areas of Texas. And so it begs the question, why is that, right? Did people just cluster together who have these conditions? Unlikely. More likely that their conditions, right, have helped lead to these chronic medical illnesses. So I shared, this is an actual home visit. If any of you saw the UH Magazine article on our program last fall, this is a picture from the magazine. This is one of our octogenarian participants. She lives in 3rd Ward. That is one of our CHWs, Lindsay on the left, and one of our medical students on the right. There are more students, they're just not in the frame. And so just to tell a little story about her, she's a very spry 81-year-old with very minimal medical conditions, right? She lives with her daughter in 3rd Ward in the same house that she's lived in for, I think, 50 years. So when she decided to enroll, so enrollment in the program is free, right? We're out in the community, we talk about the program and ask 3rd Ward and East End residents if they'd like to enroll. And she joined in, and she's been like an ambassador for us because she's very excited about the program and what we've brought to her, but honestly, she's brought us more. So she doesn't have a lot of medical needs. She actually didn't even have a lot of social needs. And after the first visit with her, the students were kind of stumped, like, well, we took care of the one thing she asked for, what do we do now? And so part of what they're also learning to do is they're very early in their health professions careers, so they're learning to listen and hear the nuance. And I pointed out to them, I said, you know, she said multiple times that she used to go to the multi-service center near her house, but it's been closed since COVID, right? And so when we were meeting with her at her home, it was like January or February of 2022. So almost 2 years that her multi-service center had been closed. But she used to go there often. This is where she socialized, this is where she exercised, this is where she saw her friends. And so students were asking, well, can you walk in your neighborhood instead of going to the service center? You know, it's closed. And she's like, I'm not really comfortable walking in this neighborhood. Even though I've lived here for 50 years, the neighborhood has changed, right? People are zipping along the streets at, you know, high speed, loud cars with loud music. She's like, I just don't feel comfortable with that. She had already tried to call her council member to talk about this and hadn't been able to get through. So the students came up with, okay, well, maybe what if we call on her behalf, right? And sort of maybe nudge it along. Maybe someone from her council member's office will call her and follow up. They did make a call. We don't know what happened next, but somehow the multi-service center got reopened. I don't know if it was her finally talking to them or just, you know, the nudge from, hey, I'm a student at University of Houston and, you know, I call on Miss So-and-so in 3rd Ward, and she and her neighbors are asking about this multi-service center. Now, so it is open now. She's able to go back. But that is also an example of not just helping her, but helping her community, because the seniors in her community, right, they use this multi-service center as the safe space where they can socialize, exercise, right? Other outside entities can come in and give presentations for them. So if you take something like that away, then she stops exercising. She stays home for longer periods of time. And as an older woman, she becomes more isolated. And that can have later effects like depression, okay? So I just use her as an example to show that what our goal is to partner with the community residents around what their priorities are. And if there is a way for us to assist, that we assist, but not just that household. If we can look at the bigger picture and things that are impacting communities or neighborhoods block by block or community by community, that is our ultimate goal. How do we help the community become healthier? Whatever health means to them, right? Not what we decide, what they decide. And so that brings me to my last slide before I turn over to Mirla, is that one of the things that we've been intentional about is looking at communities through the lens of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is where we look at the strengths and the assets of an individual, or in this case, of a community, and not just from a deficit perspective, right? What are they missing? What do they need? How do we fill that need? No. How do we first find out what are the strengths that they have right? And how can they use those strengths, or how can we highlight those strengths to understand them better, but also to get them to know that, hey, you can take care of some of these things on your own, right? You already have the assets to be able to do that. And that changes our approach, right? So oftentimes when we are, universities and we're going to help communities, we're approaching it from a needs-based approach. When in fact, the communities know what they need, right? They can tell you, they know their communities better, they understand what the needs are, and their priorities are probably different from what we've identified or what we think their priorities are. So we're doing our best to help our students and CHWs understand that even though we're in the business of medicine and nursing and social work that is definitely healthcare connected, we're taught to fix things, right? We have to now learn to approach with an open mind and look for the assets and the strengths in the folks and the neighborhoods that we're going into. And Ms. Goolsby is a good example because she's taught our students so much in the past year and change. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to Mirla so that she can tell you about the community health worker program in particular.
Can y'all hear me okay with this mic? Yes? So I guess before I get started, before I go to the next one, because actually it doesn't have the answer. Who's heard of community health workers before? I just wanted to make sure I said that everyone's on the same page before we continue. Yeah, you heard it, okay, anyone? Go ahead.
Oh, no, you asked who's heard of community health workers.
Yes, do you know what it is? Could you?
Yeah, and so these are essentially people from the community who act as brokers between the community of interest and sort of the healthcare system. And by brokering, they end up being health liaisons between the community and the health system.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page because we're meeting community health workers and we're going to talk about community health a lot. Okay, so like you said, yes, there are kind of liaison. I think the biggest piece is they're what you would think of as the frontline workers, right? Community health workers have, like, the actual title has been gone, like, a really good long time. I think here in Texas, we can think of promotores or promotoras as the main primary community health worker drivers. And they started in the valley, in terms of colonias, reaching those communities that really didn't have access to anything because you couldn't even get to the community in the first place. And so, like you mentioned, and then community health workers are from the community. They have a very thorough understanding of the community that they serve, whether that's because they come from the community that they're serving, or they come into the community and learn everything they can before they go out there and reach out. So, the community health workers, you can have someone straight from the community or have someone that has a bachelor's or a master's degree and serve in a community health worker perspective as well. Additionally, like you said, they do serve as a liaison or link in the community between not only health but social services as well. It's really connecting, becoming that gap and advocating for that community member, but also educating the community member in terms of, like what Dr. Johnson said, collectively, right? Like, we're learning from all these participants that we meet, but also the community health worker can bring what they've learned as a community member that was, part of the community that is now bridging that, becoming that bridge and liaison. They also built a lot of knowledge, right? Both from what they learned with the community, but also learning, I think we have a couple of community health workers where we talk about, like, oh yes, let's connect them to healthcare, or let's connect them to this PCP. But really what they really want to learn about is, how do I get my kid to college, or how do I help my student do better in math? It's things that, yes, we come in with a base of let's talk about medicine, right? But really what they want to know is something completely different. So yes, the big thing is that they're a liaison for the community. They're there to really become the advocate for the community member as well. So there's several titles that we've heard. So has anyone not heard any of these? Or do you know of any other term that used to basically say a community health worker, but it's this term? Have you heard a different one? No? I think the most one I heard is promotores or promotor de salud, especially here in Texas. Outreach worker, peer educator, and all of those are really, like, a lot of community health worker jobs are very grant-based, so it's really depending on the work that we're doing. most community health workers do like diabetes awareness or specific health work. But our community health workers here they do so much. They basically they are all in these titles. So in our household center care program here, our community health workers do very specific things. One is they engage community members to recruit them into our program. And then obviously they recruit them into a program, go through the enrollment, like Dr. Johnson said, everything for us is free. But because we talk about like all that we're gonna do, a lot of community members like, yeah, that doesn't seem free. So it takes a little while to get someone kind of the buy-in on what we're gonna be able to, one, assist them and walk with them with, but also them understanding that they're helping us teach better health professionals as well. Most of our community members are like the participant you saw earlier. They're more excited about, I'm gonna be able to meet students and really impact future health professionals and really talking to people that are gonna be making those decisions in the future. Our community health workers also are there to build rapport. They're our primary contact to every participant in our program. Although the students come with us on visits and work with the participant as well, the community health worker is actually the link to our participants. They're the ones that communicate with them the most. They're the ones that the participants know and trust, and they start building that trust with the students as those visits go on. But because the CHW is the one that calls them almost bi-weekly to assist them and just have connection with them. And then obviously we provide resource navigation, whether that's something we've identified or something that participant has really specifically asked for. And then lastly, we complete the visits with the students collectively. And sometimes during visits, we might have every discipline and a community health worker, or we might have like 2 nursing students and a community health worker. It really varies, but we try to make it as interdisciplinary team as possible. Dr. Johnson, was this your slide?
That's yours.
That's fine. So again, just saying how it's not just healthcare, right? We are not focused on what's wrong. We're focused on let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to know what it is that their challenges are and what do they want to work on, right? We want to come in from a space of not the illness, but like what does the community need and what is the particular participant need. We want to focus on supporting the community as a whole, and then minimize the acute care. Most of our participants right now, like Dr. Johnson said, might have not necessarily a lot of health needs, or they express not having a lot of health needs, but once they start talking to us, really and thinking, oh, I can ask this person for help, not in the sense of I need help, but I cannot connect to this resource, they are able to help us. So it's really bridging that gap with our community that we're working on here. So finally here was just like what we were getting to that Dr. Johnson was talking about, whereas what we want to make sure that there's equity, right? And not like the quality that we typically think of. Making sure that we meet everyone where they are and then addressing what it is that's needed for that particular participant.
All right, so we are going to stop there and move to our panel. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and tell you what health profession school they are in and where they are from. Let's start with you.
I'm Courtney. I am a community health worker.
Where are you from?
And I'm originally from Minnesota, and then I've been in Houston for 2 years.
My name is Devin, and I'm a senior nursing student, and I'm originally from Plano, Texas, which is near Dallas, if you know.
Hi everyone, I am Itzel Tejeda. I am part of the Tilman J.Fertitta Family College of Medicine, and I am originally from Mexico.
I'm George Flores. I'm a first-year medical student at the College of Medicine, and I'm originally from San Antonio.
You can keep it. Oh, I'm from New York. Well, I've been in Texas for, this year is 20 years. I came here for residency. And Mirla, where are you from?
I'm originally from Mexico, been here for 32 years.
Okay, there you go. All right, so we'll just get started and anybody can answer, okay? So as we just talked about, HCC is a program designed to serve the community and specifically to address social drivers of health. Can you share what are the most common social drivers of health that you've encountered so far on home visits. And then our traditional medical concerns, what you usually encounter when you go on a home visit.
Okay. Gosh, that makes it seem like I kind of tech savvy, I guess not enough. So with traditional medicine versus just other social needs, I would say on all of the visits I've been on, we very rarely will hit just health concerns. Some participants may have more than others, and it's a lot of what Dr. Johnson shared where they're more chronic, where it's I have hypertension, I'm managing these bigger illnesses than just typical aches and pains or little things that some might come into, but we more hit on things like housing, wanting to go back into education or education for their children. Food scarcity is huge. Third Ward in particular is a food desert, and the food markets they have there are really expensive, so we do a lot of finding food pantries, food boxes through the Houston Food Bank, and applying for SNAP or WIC. So those are some of the things I definitely see, those social drivers, as well as basically everything Mirla showed in that whole circle. We typically hit those more than just healthcare, but and traditional medicine.
If I can just add to that, I think just like the link, for example, like in the traditional clinic, we just see like loss of follow-up, or there's like a lack of compliance from the patient to take the medicine. So that's in a clinical traditional setting, that's all we see. But when you go and talk to them in their houses, then you realize that they're not just lost a follow-up, they just they lost their car and there's no way they can get to their appointments, or they can no longer afford the medicine, or they lost their insurance. So it really makes you see the patient as a whole rather than just the health concern and just like look at that little part of their lives.
Speaking from my own experience, I can say that the two biggest drivers that determine health, when I'm at HCC or at our longitudinal primary care, would have to be citizenship status and your economic situation, because that'll make or break you. When you are not a citizen of the United States or a resident, it limits what you can do and who you can go to severely, and you end up having to rely on your kinship networks, friends, community, and they can only bridge the gap so far. But easily the biggest determinant of health is going to be your economic situation. If you do not have employee-sponsored health insurance, or you don't have the kind of capital to be able to buy really good health insurance, who you can see and what you can do about your health problems is going to be really limited. So the big thing that you have to be aware of is people's economic situation, and to be sensitive to that. And even what you can realistically do will be limited by that, and you have to learn how to work within that framework to be able to accomplish and meet their needs. So it requires a lot of thinking outside of the box. And if you've grown up when money was tight, you can understand the struggles that they deal with. But even growing up in like a single parent household where money was tight, the situations that I see sometimes is honestly shocking that this would happen in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So one thing that you can do if you're interested in a career in healthcare, anything like that, is just try to understand the kind of resources that people are dealing with at this level, even just a few blocks outside of this college campus.
So for me, I think another big aspect of what we're dealing with is their access to transportation. So on the one home visit that I did get to go on, like my client, she did not have any transportation and she was not in a safe neighborhood. So her resources are vastly decreased. So that's one thing, walking into somebody's home and you want to focus on their health care and you want to see like, what issues can I fix? But you really need to start at the beginning and be like, okay, what are you doing? What do you need? Like, why do you want me to be here and what help do you need? So I think going into that and listening, like she did have housing issues, she did have other medical issues that needed to be addressed, but you needed to give her the resources like transportation, because she couldn't go and address these medical issues that we're talking about without that like gap being bridged, you know? So I think just getting the full picture, and they do like to talk a lot. Our clients are very, very open, they're very kind, and they do welcome us into their homes, and like we need to take that as the opportunity that it is and just let them kind of tell us what they need.
We'll move on to a second question. So HCC is also a program designed to teach professional students, such as yourselves, in the health and well-being, obviously not determined by personal choices like Dr. Johnson was talking to us in the beginning, and genetics, but by social circumstances. Can you give examples from your home visits of social circumstances affecting a particular participant's health?
So, I mean, I think we kind of touched on that question already, but specifically with the visit that we had, these ladies, she lived in a neighborhood where there were no sidewalks, and the little sidewalk they had, it was so crooked, and she couldn't walk there. So whenever she would go to the doctor, they would tell her, well, why don't you need to exercise, so if you can please like walk 20 minutes around your neighborhood, it would really benefit your health. Well, where is she gonna actually walk? And then just think about what would be the next, like the closest park she could go to. Like, there were no parks that were accessible to her. So I think that's one of the main things in which her health is directly being affected by her zip code rather than her personal choices.
So for my client that we saw, she was losing her home. She was living with her mother at the time, who was about to pass, and she was not going to have housing the next 2 months. So that was our major issue to focus on, is like, where are you going to be? And she had a son who was attending school, so she wanted to stay in the district. She's worked really hard to get him into an advanced program. So there are other needs, and we did have to find other housing options for her.
So I'm just going to add one. In my work before I came to U of H, I used to sometimes go out with my team to homeless and or transitionally housed veterans. And we had one in particular who every time he came to clinic, he had heart failure. And if you have heart failure, there's a ton of medications that you need to take, and it's a very specific diet you need to follow. And he was always telling us that he was taking all his meds and everything was okay, but we couldn't understand, why is he always in such a bad state, always short of breath, always. And so we asked him, can we come to where you are so I can sort of see what your setup is? Because he did say that the house he was in was damaged during the freeze. Pipes and all kinds of things got damaged. Whatever year that was, I don't remember. And he had not been able to get these things repaired. So when we get there, there's no electricity in the home. So his priority was fixing the home. His priority was really not feeding himself or following a diet, or, he was taking his meds when he could remember to take them. But his focus was trying to repair his home. And so this was at least a year after the freeze. And he was still in this house that, was not meeting his needs. So, what I learned, that was, I think, my very first home visit. And this was a few years ago before coming to U of A. And that really shed a light on what was happening, because he actually didn't share all that information in the clinic, but he allowed us into his home. And so we get to see things and ask questions. And I just want to point out that if someone allows you to come into their home and you're a bunch of strangers, then, first of all, that's a privilege. But secondly, the fact that they have opened the door to you should signal that they are ready to share. Typically, it signals that they are ready to share, right? They may not necessarily ask for help, but they're inviting you into a very vulnerable space so that you can see, right, and understand better what is happening.
And then just to add into that question as well, I have quite a few participants that have like hypertension, high blood pressure, and while we can pull back and say like, what actions did you take that led you to that, like those health behaviors we shared, A lot of it is that they're living in very high stress environments. If you're familiar with Third Ward, in particular, where these participants live, they are surrounded by loud cars, gunshots, dogs barking, just this high stress. And if you are familiar with like fight or flight, you should come back down from fight or flight like relatively quickly. They're living in this kind of constant state of alertness and back and forth into that fight or flight and high cortisol and everything that we can pull the medical side of it from. But just the social side of you're just always on edge, right? And so that's leading to some of these health concerns too. And while we can ask the questions of, well, what are you doing to manage that? Some of it is simply their environment, and on these house visits we set goals for them and work with them like, what do you want to change? What are your hopes and dreams? And a lot of them will say, I want just peace and quiet. I had a person that's living in CUNY Homes that wants to buy a whole plot of land for her and both of her parents and her brother to live on, which is a huge goal for someone living in CUNY Homes. It is a huge goal for, I think, probably everyone in this room with today's economic situation. But she just wants peace and quiet. She wants everyone to feel safe and to get out of where they are. And that's what's leading to some of these health things that we're seeing too that are out of their control.
Okay, so for social circumstances affecting patients' health, this wasn't at HCC, but this was something I saw at Holmes Clinic, which is a collaboration between Baylor College of Medicine, UH, all the pharmacy schools, and UH, TJ, FFFCom. So
It's a clinic for homeless individuals.
yes, it's a clinic for homeless individuals. It's a really amazing experience that I would highly recommend if you're able to do. But one of the things that we saw was a gentleman who had recently gotten out of prison, and he had serious issues being able to stay on his meds, and he had psychiatric issues, but it's because he was in danger of being robbed. When you're homeless, you are one of the most vulnerable populations in our society. And this man was just having issues with compliance, not because he didn't understand, not because of any deficiency on his part, but because of the situation of not being able to have a place to live, not being able to secure his things, just things that you never really think about when you have the privilege of having a roof over your head, you know when your next meal is going to be, and you have support networks. And a lot of people end up falling into these situations through no fault of their own or through a combination of just a bunch of bad things just coming together. And you have to meet them where they're at and understand all these things. And that's why it's important to ask them not just about their health problems, but understand where they're at in life and how they're doing and how they're dealing with the challenges that they face daily. If you can tease that out, it'll go a long way to understanding the best way to implement really great care and giving them the help that they need.
Thank you. So this question is not for Courtney. First, it is about community health workers, and they are key to the success of our program. So how do you think their role enhances the program?
So during my visit, it was actually all of our first times going onto a home visit, so we were all not familiar with the client, and our community health worker was great. She led kind of the whole process. She introduced us. She had never spoken to the client before that day, and they got to know each other. They built trust, and it showed us, like, going to our first time, like, you can speak openly. You can trust these people. Like, we are there to help them. And so in my personal experience, she did amazing. And I was one nursing student, and we had 2 medical school students. So we're all kind of very medicine based. And that's what we're thinking. We're thinking about the health. And then we have a community health worker who's like, no, we need to look at everything. We need to talk about housing. We need to talk about access to health care. We need to talk about food. We need to talk about just, every aspect which makes a person a person. So in that sense, they really changed my perspective personally on healthcare and what I can do as a nurse to kind of reach the holistic care of each patient.
Yeah, so I think the main thing for me, it's in its name, community health workers. So like I said, I'm originally from Mexico and I moved to Houston when I started medical school. So there are a lot of resources out there that I'm not familiar with. And through this experience, I'm learning about them and I'll be able to share this with my patients. But for the time being, the community health worker is an extremely resourceful person that can connect the patients and the people with the things they need. So I wasn't aware of the gold card, for example, and it's a huge thing here in Harris County, but this is not something that...
What's a gold card?
Gold card is a very good question. Well, it's I don't really know how to explain it, but it's pretty much health insurance, financial assistance. So it's like a sliding scale for patients, and they can have great access to healthcare.
In the Harris Health System.
In just Harris, exactly. So see, I'm learning. So I think besides obviously what you mentioned, that comfort and just like being able to just make us all feel equal, that was a great thing. But also the resources for me is something that I wouldn't have known for myself.
Yeah, community health workers are the bomb, man. Like they will get you everything that you need, and they'll connect your patients to all the stuff they need. Like community health workers, no joke, literally know everything, and they will get you what you need, and if you don't know what it is, they will find it. They're amazing to work with. They help you reprioritize, because as health professionals, we have this tendency to medicalize everything or to look at everything through the medical gaze. And when you're talking to patients, they're worried about making rent. They're worried about getting their kids go to good school. They're worried about employment. Just all the business of life that are the big things that you're always going to worry about, that people tend to push their health to the back. And the thing is, you can't really deal with health when you're not dealing with like the main things that are driving people, which is being able to hold down a good job, being able to take care of their kids, being able to have a secure, safe environment where they can live and work. If you can meet all of those needs, then you can have that conversation with them and help them take care of their health in a really productive and meaningful and lasting way.
I would just comment that I think the biggest strength a community health worker brings is, even because we are an educational institution, sometimes in the community, you know, institutions like ours, like U of H, College of Medicine, have not had great history in the communities that we're working with. And so coming in sometimes when we say I'm from U of H, there's this like, okay, but like, what are you bringing to the table? Like there's this hesitancy. But a lot of community members know what a promotor is, right? A lot of community members know what a community health worker is. They know that we're coming from a space that's, yes, I know, you know, this community, I know what you're living through. And so a lot of our community members really kind of build that tight relationship with our community health workers, because we're coming in from the community for the community, and they know this, right? So even now, sometimes I know they, even in visits, initially they'll just speak to the community health worker because they're the ones that have been talking to them, and then they open up to the students. So I think the biggest strength that they bring is, yes, all the resources they bring, because they know so much, and if they don't know it, they'll find it. And if they can't find it, they'll tell the participant, hey, I looked extensively, but we didn't find it. And the participants appreciates that, you know. For in the past, it's like you tell someone, yes, I can bring this resource for you, and then you just kind of leave it and you don't tell them. But we're very open about, I looked extensively, there's nothing for this service, but I'll continue to look. But I think the biggest strength is just that relationship coming from, again, an institution that's not really trusted, whereas it's U of H, or if it's medicine, or if it's social work, and us coming in as community health workers and really bridging that, you know, relationship there. I would have the next question. We often approach marginalized communities as having only needs, but not assets or strengths. Focusing on Third Ward and East End, what have you observed to be assets or strengths of these communities?
So one thing, and again, I do more work in Third Ward, so I'll kind of focus on Third Ward. These people are resourceful, and I think if you look at groups of people that have certain disparities, even though you can view them and say, what are they lacking, what are they missing, what are they fighting against, you will see once you start talking to them and getting in the community that they find ways around it as much as possible, right? We help to kind of push it to higher levels or get them into healthcare or applications, but just within like their own community, if they don't have transportation, they typically have found a friend that they coordinate with, and maybe they get a ride from them if they need to go somewhere, and in return they'll watch the other person's children, right? Kind of just those systems that they've created internally to find those resources. I have a participant we just met, and as I was prepping my team, I said she does not have transportation, but she has impressed me with her knowledge of buses and Metro in Houston, which not everyone's comfortable taking for various reasons. If you watch the news, Metro isn't always the safest. And we sat down with her. My team was like, okay, like she's got the buses, but we still want to, try to navigate what else we can find with transportation. We brought up a topic, and she started listing off bus numbers. And one of our students was like, well, do you even know what time that goes? She started listing off the times for these buses. And so they're resourceful, and that's a huge strength is they know what they need to find, and they try to find it on their own. And that's why some of our participants love this program, because we can be that extra boost and that extra search for other resources and kind of helping to advocate to get them into those different organizations.
So, since Courtney talked about Third Ward, I'm going to talk a little bit more about East End. And also, I live in East End, so I have a personal experience there. And I can say that the rich culture that the community has, it's really, really enhancing. Like you were mentioning, they are a very rich community, and they will talk to all their neighbors. They will have, like, oh, I cannot pick up the kids. Like they will have schedules so people can look up for their kids. Like they can, like lunch schedules, or hey, I don't have sugar. Can you lend me some sugar? Which for me, growing up, I thought that was the normal, but coming to the United States, I realized that that is not normal. There's a lot of isolation. And for our elder patients, it's also a really good thing because they get to socialize within, just within their neighborhood. And just talk about my personal experience when I moved here. My first language is Spanish, and I felt very welcomed in my neighborhood. I see all these people going up to work really early in the morning, coming back home really late at night, and what I see is hardworking people that want to support their families.
What really impressed me about Third Ward, coming here as a complete stranger to Houston just last summer, was the sense of ownership that people in this community have for the Third. I would not have expected it from a neighborhood that looks like this, from where I come from, where people mostly just kind of stick to their own parts of town. But the sense of community pride that I see here is a huge asset, and one that I think is one of the most important things we can use to accomplish our goals and meet the needs of this community. So that's just something that really stuck with me.
So for my personal experience, my client was actually a little bit different from yours in the sense that she felt very isolated in her community. She didn't really have any neighbors that she could rely on, but she had a young son who would walk to school by himself. So that was a big concern for her, is the safety of her child. So they would sit on FaceTime the entire way that he would walk, because unfortunately she's losing her vision and she can't walk. So she relies on Metro Lift to get her to all of her dialysis appointments 3 times a week. Every week at 4 in the morning, she's ready to get on Metro Lift. So she's not only resourceful, but the one thing she wanted to talk about was how proud she was of her son. And like she put in all the work to get him at the advanced school. So he's going to receive the best education that he can get, and she's putting in the work so that he can make it there. So in that sense, that was a strength that I saw.
Number 6.
Okay. How is the HCC experience impacting your future career in your respective health profession or community focused work?
Well, I think it's a really, really good experience. And like Dr. Johnson and Mirla are mentioning, I feel privileged. So when I go to these house visits, I don't feel like, oh, I'm helping them. I really feel like they're helping me. I learned so much from these visits, and just things, like I said, I'm not familiar with Houston. And even though I may be of Hispanic culture, I'm learning about a new culture here. And for me, this is something that I'm able to grow roots in this community, and hopefully I'll be able to serve my patients better with this new perspective that I'm gaining.
So for me, I would say well, I'm going to be going into more of, you have to remember, everybody gets sick. So I'm going into pediatric care. So you have to look at all your patients. A lot of them, even in the clinical setting that I'm dealing with right now, they don't have insurance. They don't know how they're going to afford their medication. So as providers, you have to think one medication is $4, but another one who has the same like therapeutic effect is $4,000. So it's important to look at, can they afford the medication that we're prescribing if we're worried about adherence to those medications? So it's kind of giving me a perspective of not only holistic care of, do you have somewhere to live? Do you have mold in your home that's making you sick? But, do they have access to medication that we are giving them? So it's kind of, for me, given more holistic aspect of each patient and their families and what I can do and what other needs that they have besides their health.
I would say HCC is having a really profound effect on how I'm going to approach healthcare once I become a practicing physician. For one thing, it's excellent experience working with other health professionals and community workers as a first year. I had never heard about that at any other school, and was one of the main reasons why I went to the medical school here at UH. So that's an incredibly important thing, is having that experience. But something else that it taught me is that the problem that patients tell you is only an incomplete picture. There's always so much more going on in their life that you can only understand if you take the initiative to ask and to build that trust to understand. And even just talking about it and letting them tell you about it can be so incredibly therapeutic and important, and build that kind of trust where you can understand and meet them where they're at and give them care that they really need. You can never really directly fix every single problem they're going to have, but if you can understand what they're going through, you can help them live through it and live with it, even if you can't cure it. And often that's even better than just curing the disease they have. It's just being there with them through it.
So I think we're going to stop there. I believe we are at time. So we would like to thank you. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their experiences.